Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Conscious Grief series. I am joined by two very special people today, Duane and Catherine O'Kane. And Duane and Catherine co-founded Clear Mind International Institute, which provides personal, therapeutic, and professional programs throughout Europe and North America. You have recently produced an award-winning documentary called Real, The Bravest Thing You Will Ever Be, which is continuing to gain global recognition for its crucial message. You have also written a book called Real, The Power of Authentic Connection. And that really is what your work is about, the power of authentic and vulnerable connection and how that can regulate and support people to move through difficult and traumatic experiences. So welcome to the Conscious Grief series.
Thank you so much for having us.
It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah.
Well, I say you're very special people because I was thinking about it. It was about 14 years ago that I was
14.
I think it is. Yeah. That I was. I had a therapist in London, a lovely lady called Anne, Irish lady, who suggested to me that I should do some group work, and I was absolutely horrified. I thought, oh my God.
I'm sure many can relate, right?
Yeah. I thought, my goodness, I could never talk in a room with other people about my problems, and I was like, oh, no, thank you. And then I thought about it some more, and I ended up doing the awakening, a very transformative experience. So maybe you'd like to start by telling the listeners, the viewers, what is the awakening?
Well, as you so beautifully outlined, there is such power in the experience of a group. It is terrifying when you think about, I am going to go to this workshop where I am going to talk about things that I wouldn't normally talk about, share things that I wouldn't normally share, with the idea that I'm going to have a different experience, to move through whatever it is that I am where I'm getting stuck in my life, in order to have a different experience of myself. And unlike one-to-one therapy, there's something quite magical that happens when you share with a group of people that are just a group of people. It's not your therapist doing therapy. It's just sharing with a whole group of people who are also talking about themselves quite vulnerably. So the awakening is like a group transformational experience. It's not a kind of workshop where you just go to get information. You have an experience.
Yeah, and it can't be understated, the impact of addressing and having an experience of an innate need we all have to feel connected, to feel part of, to have aspects of ourselves be seen and embraced and understood. The impact that can have on our overall state of being doesn't get addressed any other way. Even though in the Western world we have so many surface remedies for dealing with our state of anxiety, depression, upset, grief, all of that doesn't get close to where the true remedy is. And that is to appreciate in our history as a species and as how we socialize, that we've kind of divorced ourselves from what's natural to us. And that's to be together and to experience safety in our vulnerability, not just as an idea or as a concept or in one-to-one therapy, but just as a way of being in life. And that's why it's so powerful and so magical and so miraculous, but it's so natural.
And it is a miraculous a miraculous sort of workshop, because I guess we never know who's going to be in the room. You never know whose story you're going to relate to, the connections that are made. I mean, I'm still very good friends with Zoe, who I met at the Awakening.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess you guys have so many tools, and you facilitate in so many different ways. It's not just sitting in the room telling the story. It's a very deep process, isn't it, that people go through, and they're long days. It's a 2.5 day workshop. Yeah.
It's meant, because we don't change based on just understanding. We change based on experiencing something different. Yeah. So Duane and I have been, as you mentioned off the top, in this field for a very, very long time. And it is through fostering a kind of unique, tailored experience for each person who shares their story, right? You have a different story than the person sitting beside you. For you to lean into that new territory, that new experience for yourself is going to require a very tailored approach to help you get into that part of you that you have disconnected from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you invert the formula in a way, when we're talking about relationship intervention, like we do this through experience, not through just an idea. We didn't get hurt because of an idea when we were younger. We got hurt because we had an experience relationally that really impacted us. So that's how we changed initially from our core self, was what happened relationally in an experience. So the healing is the same. It's just the other way around, where we can't heal or correct as an idea, reading a book. You do it through having an experience where your nervous system actually changes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so interesting that it's all relational in that sense. And as you shared about it really being a heart understanding, because, I remember when I did the Awakening and we had the workbook and you're explaining things, and I was just so overwhelmed with emotion. I literally cried, I think, from the day I got there till the day I left, the minute I left. And I was like, I don't even really understand, what half of these exercises is happening, but something was happening, like you say, to my nervous system, that I had held so much grief inside of me for so long that it was the first time I'd had a container to let it out.
I remember that I remember that very well. Just the very first circle, right? Where all you do is say your name and one word to describe what you're feeling. And you were just all there. And I was so touched and flattered because you felt safe enough for that part of you to let the room see that.
Yeah, even right now when you talk about it, it gives me chills again,
Yeah, I mean, I could even cry, just being back there in that room.
Tara, you're wonderful.
And then at the end,
I mean, that little experience is what happens for people. We can't feel what's really happening. I mean, grief for you had a really good reason for being there, but it never had a pathway. It never had a safe container. And that's what we all need to be able to move through the difficult experiences we've all been through in our lives. We need to be held safely by other humans.
Yeah. And it's
metaphorically and sometimes literally.
Yeah. And I remember the beautiful cradling exercises and that it can, we can be holding all of this stuff inside of us for many, many years. Some people may be watching this and the grief is recent and raw. And some people may be thinking, my parents died when I was younger. And guess what? I have not been thinking or dealing with this now until I'm in my 40s. And that's a very common experience for adults who were bereaved as children.
Well, yes, because the adult that you would have wanted to turn to at the time was also in their big grief process and dealing with it however they learned to deal with it, or not dealing with it however they didn't learn how to deal with it, right? The instinct of a child to go to the parent. Number one, you've lost one. And number two, the second one is probably not available.
Yeah.
So
It's
it
like
can be
losing two parents.
such a hard time.
Instead, getting the message, we congratulate each other for being strong. Oh my gosh. Instead of being real, letting it have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Instead, we phrase it and congratulate each other for being strong and getting through it. But what have you done? Now it's going to, you're not dealing with it, so it's going to deal with you.
And we're just to tap back into the bigger context around all of this too. We have been so programmed in the Western world to, quote, independence. And whenever we go through horrible, hard life passages, which all of us will at some point in time, nobody gets to escape that. We can get through anything if we are held.
Yeah.
Right? It isn't the severity of the experience that has the impact. It's were we held through it? Were we connected through it? Did we have somewhere to go? Did we have somewhere to lean? That's what gets us through. Humans can survive some really, really horrible things if we feel connected and held as we move through.
Mm-hmm.
When we grow up in a family system, a healthy family is not one that is void of difficulties or upsets or mistakes. A healthy family system is one where when mistakes happen, they're repaired. And that the children, the offspring in the family system always feel like they have a pathway back to the good. Meaning when somebody makes a mistake, they can repair it. They can say, I'm sorry. That must have had a great impact on you. I'm really sorry. I'm not going to do that again. I appreciate what's happened for you. So there's a pathway back to the good. So when you grow up, you can enter your adult life and know that even in difficulties, well, you know what? It's okay because there could be a pathway back to the good. But when there isn't, when you're told to be strong or shut up or go to your room or get hit or abused.
Or your grieving process is not seen, it just goes underground and you're supposed to just have everything be okay all of a sudden.
Then you're stuck with, how do I feel safe and okay? And that's when we go into fight or flight or freeze and please or addictions. What am I going to do to feel okay? I need to feel okay. And I can't do it the normal, real, healthy way. I have to do it in some other way. And if that doesn't give a whole new context on understanding addictions in the recovery community, particularly in the UK, which we spend a lot of time with, like people just are trying to, what do I have to do to feel okay? I got no other way to do it but to use. Oh my God.
Yeah, no, it's such powerful work, coming back to the connection, and that's like connection within, connection to other people, like you say, building the trust in the universe, as you refer to it, and
the friendly universe,
as Einstein referred to it as well.
The friendly universe. And then once people have done the awakening, they can go on to do the rude awakening, which the process to me that was the most memorable for me, of which there were many, but was the one where we started off at the party around
the pool party, the mask.
We won't maybe reveal too much, but I just felt that there was obviously it's a 2-week, a very, very intensive workshop, and the potential for releasing anger, was something that I thought was so brilliantly done. And obviously in grief, we can be holding a lot of anger, sometimes consciously. We're using anger because we don't want to feel the vulnerability, or sometimes we're just pushing it right down because we don't feel like we are good people if we're angry. So yeah, maybe you'd like to talk more a little bit about anger and the...
Yeah, anger is a very natural response when something happens that's not okay. And it's not logic, right? Your parent dies, it's not, you're going to feel angry. Somebody you love dies, you're going to feel angry. You can't logic your way out of that and go, oh, well, they didn't intend to do it, whatever. You're going to be angry at possibly the person. You're going to be angry at the circumstances. Who knows? It's a natural human response to when things are not okay. And when we try to push our anger down and away, that's when grief can become complicated and turn into depression too. I mean, anger is a very primal part of who we are as humans. And in this culture, we often, we don't allow ourselves anger because we confuse it with violence. And we think we're being bad even for feeling the feeling. The feeling at its core is actually a really healthy, good, beautiful thing.
And as you know, in the work we do, it's not the beginning, the middle, and end either, anger. The more we're able to allow ourselves that natural response, it's like walking into an anger room. There's a door on the other end of that room, and it's called sadness, grief, more primary feelings that are underneath it all, that are more tender, more vulnerable. And the anger is just like an adaptive mechanism to try and take care of yourself. But underneath it all is a very, very tender, as you know, I'm not explaining anything new to you, how tender that place is. So that's still where we're aiming for, is that the connection really happens in the next room.
And why do you think we're so afraid of feeling the sadness and the vulnerability?
Well, when we haven't learned there's somewhere to go, the feelings are overwhelming. When you've learned there's somewhere to go, they're not overwhelming. So when you're a kid and something happens and you're upset, you're crying, something has happened, if you can go to someone and get comfort, you learn, I can feel that. It's okay. But if something happens and you can't go and get comfort, then those feelings are so intense. It's like we literally regulate our nervous systems through connection. Doesn't happen otherwise. You can do all the yogic breathing in the world that you want, but humans are wired to achieve regulation in connection. That's how we're wired.
Yeah, and it's not just, to answer that question about how come we end up in that place. It's not just in our families, it's cultural as well. Like we grow up watching the most powerful people in our countries default to divisive, angry, blaming, modeling. Here's how you deal with conflict. You find somebody else wrong. You don't listen. You don't hear. You don't consider the other person. You just have to win. And it's immoral what's taking place in our world in terms of the leaders of the world. Can you imagine what it would be like if our parents, our teachers, our community leaders, our politicians started advocating a stance of emotional responsibility and vulnerability and consideration of others as much as consideration of self? That's natural in our DNA. Indigenous cultures embrace that. In North America, our indigenous cultures had agreements and understandings amongst each other. They couldn't understand when there was a need, how you could not consider other the same in the tribe. Like, what are you talking about? That your needs are more important than somebody else's, that you have hierarchy or more privileged people. What are you talking about? It just does not make any sense, because it doesn't make any sense. And yet this is the way we live.
Yeah, and it's, again, important to put that bigger context around it, right? Because when people are suffering, they think, oh, there's something wrong with me. There's a much bigger context around this. There's something wrong with the way that we are living as humans as well.
So the awakening and all of our root awakening, our courses, it's all about actually replicating our natural state. We're not inventing anything new. Our ability and skill to get there, sure, we have that, because it's urgent for us. It's necessary for us. And it's personal for us. This is the way we want to live. And I hope that we provide that kind of environment for people to feel safe, like you did in that first circle. Like it was almost as if you said, finally, somebody's talking to me. And you just instantly respond, and people instantly will respond that way, even if you've never had any kind of experience with this before, because it's natural inside of us. We're waiting for somebody to say, well, there you are. I see you. I know that part of you.
And I always, I can never remember the exact thing it was. Obviously we come in with our big traumas and the things that, seem obvious to deal with and talk about. And then someone will share about something that I would have thought, oh my gosh, that seems so small and insignificant. And I would have been really embarrassed to have mentioned that or brought it to the circle. And but it's been really bothering me and upsetting me. And so when somebody else has the courage and the bravery to bring that to the light, like what it does for everybody else, and that's, again, the amazing magic that happens in group work.
Yeah. We really, really learn from other people's stories. And that's something that you don't get in one-on-one therapy either, is that experience that you have witnessing someone else share their story and move through it. And when we think about trauma, that we use the word trauma, we think about these very big dramatic experiences, but it is the experience of disconnection, having nowhere to go. We now call that relational trauma. And that's every bit as impactful. And particularly if those kind of things were patterns got repeated over time, little moments over time, it acts like water on a landscape, right? Drip, 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 drip. It entrenches over time when you have what appears to be little tiny moments that just repeat themselves. So for example, if anger or sadness is not allowed in your home, well, that might not be a very big moment when that occurred, when someone said, can you smile for me instead of crying? Wipe away those tears, give me a smile. When somebody says something like that, wipe away those tears, give me a smile. That doesn't sound traumatic, but what if that was said to you for your whole life? Wipe away those tears, give me a smile.
Eventually it'll become a stiff upper lip.
I would say that I know a lot of people in the UK.
That's where that expression comes from.
Yeah, exactly.
So again, those moments of disconnection when what we were actually feeling, who we actually were, was not seen and was not mirrored back. That's what disconnection is, right? We need to see ourselves being seen, hear ourselves being heard, feel ourselves being felt. That's connection. So when it unplugs, that might not be in a dramatic moment.
And what could you say to people who are very afraid of doing group work? What would you suggest to them?
Well, I would suggest they start by watching our real documentary because it's a real dot movie. If you just plug in real dot movie.
REAL dot movie.
Yeah, because it was an awakening workshop that was filmed.
Mm.
So you will get to see the experience. You'll get to be part of it. And that will allow you the relative safety of sitting in your living room instead of in a group of strangers.
Instead of popcorn.
To feel into what that experience is. And so beyond that, I would also say that every single person who comes into one of those rooms is also completely freaked out and terrified about sitting in a circle of people, and we're all going to start telling the truth instead of doing what we normally do.
And again, I mean, if you watch this movie, these are a group of people
Didn't know each other,
and they're coming into a circle, and there's cameras and there's microphones.
Yes.
Nothing scripted. It's all completely real. And your experience, when despite all of that, when there is a milieu or an environment of safety and understanding, what naturally emerges despite all of that, it's stunning and it's beautiful just to see humans being human, and how beautiful and how innocent and how perfect every person actually is in their core.
Mm-hmm. And the experience of the awakening ultimately is that we mirror that back to you, because the group naturally responds. We're wired for connection. When someone's vulnerable, it's really natural to respond. If Duane and I have skill, it's in helping people become vulnerable. But once they're there, we naturally respond. It is so obvious. So for example, if somebody in the circle is talking about how they're frightened that they're not good enough, maybe this came from experiences in their lives, it is so obvious as we're looking from the outside that that is not true. Mm-hmm. So when we're brave enough to say these things that are so scary and so vulnerable, and we think everybody's going to run screaming from the room if I show this part of me, but I do, and I look over there and I see acceptance and I see understanding and I see compassion and I see care, literally that changes how we feel about ourselves. Mm-hmm. Oh, maybe I'm not so bad. Maybe it's okay.
We call this stepping in, staying in, and looking around, meaning I'm going to actually step in to saying what I normally wouldn't say, be vulnerable where I normally wouldn't be vulnerable, step in and take that risk. Stay in, meaning I'm going to tolerate the initial feelings of discomfort. And oh my God, I got to get back to my control. I got to get back to my strategic self. I got to get back to my position. I'm going to stay in. I'm going to stay in and let myself feel what I have put off feeling my whole life. I'm going to step in. I'm going to stay in, let myself feel. And here's where the magic happens. Then I'm going to look around. Is this world that I've entered what I thought it is? I feared it was going to be? Am I being attacked here? Am I being judged here? Am I safe? Who am I too? Who is this person? Who are they and who am I now? Oh my God. I'm witnessing and experiencing a new part of me. I'm experiencing a new part of others. And it is going to feel psychedelic without taking ayahuasca. I mean, or mushrooms. This is psychedelic because it's the electricity of experiencing reality. This is the real world.
And literally what happens there is we are rewiring ourselves, right? We're creating new neural pathways. So that's also how psychedelics work. Mm-hmm. When they're used therapeutically, positively.
That's all psychedelics are doing. It's just opening up those pathways temporarily.
Well, not all,
But that's ultimately what it's up to. It is just, we have 3 nervous systems in our body, and they're all fired up. And we have a glimpse temporarily of what it's like to not have our defenses controlling everything.
Mm. Yeah, it just takes a good dose of courage.
Yes.
And what I would say to people, because my sister and my cousin did it last year, and they called me on the first night, I think, and they were like, "What is this? We don't want to go back tomorrow." They know that that's a really natural defense, because it's challenging, like you say, every nervous system, every part of us, being in an environment like that, which is not something you may have ever done before. But they did go back, and they did get an awful lot from it.
Yeah. They stepped in, they wanted to step out. Instead, they stepped in and they stayed in, and they started looking around. And then, you can't, once you've had the experience of something else, you've changed forever.
Yeah.
You can't, it's like once you learn how to ride a bike, you can't unlearn how to ride a bike. It's built into your system. Once you've experienced something else, you can't forget it. You can try and deny it, but it's always going to be part of you. There's a part of you that's always going to see something more instead of something less.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we should just mention too, what you choose to share in that workshop is totally up to you, right? It's not, it is also, we're also pride ourselves in meeting each person where they actually are. We're not pushing people into areas of discomfort that are too much.
Yeah, who was it? We had this experience with this young guy who had a baseball cap, and he just sat there the whole weekend, just
said almost nothing.
And we're kind of worried about it. Like, I wonder what's happening. He's coming back every day, and we thought, oh, he didn't get very much out of this workshop. Well, tell what happened.
Oh my goodness, he referred his whole family. He was so happy, so full. Yeah.
Amazing.
Just witnessing.
Yeah, just witnessing.
People can be like this.
Mm-hmm.
People can actually be like this.
Mm-hmm.
Are you kidding me? And it's real? Like you can't dismiss it as being postured or, it is so raw and so real. You can't deny it. Oh my God, people actually can be like this. Do you know, it's fascinating. What's the first thing people do when they get together in a group? What at a party? What's the first thing you say to somebody when you meet a stranger?
How are you?
How are you? And what do you do?
What do you do?
Right? What do you do? It's one of the first things how we compartmentalize. Do you know, at the end of the weekend, I would say 95% of the time,
nobody has a clue.
We don't have any idea what anybody does.
Yeah. But we know who each other is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We know the most vulnerable parts of ourselves. And I just feel like what you were sharing, we're recording this in January of 2024, and the global grief of, like you were saying, with the leaders that we have and the atrocities that we're seeing. And it's hard to fathom, like, that there are human beings doing these things. And, the work that happens in the groups that you do, it's like tapping into the vulnerability in us, and the love and the compassion. And, some of us can have real big, tough layers, around our hearts, and build strong walls around wanting to feel anything. And I guess that's where those people are coming from, and if, and this is why this work's so important, because it makes us tap into our, like you say, our community, the indigenous people, that, like, that's how we were meant to be,
Yes.
Caring for one another.
And one of the beauties of a workshop like The Awakening is that when we're just wandering out there in the world, we select our groups. Mm-hmm. You don't select this group of people.
Right.
And so you get to know people at a level that is very deep. People who you might have normally judged out there on the street, or you would say, oh, that's not my kind of person. And we can't hurt anybody we legitimately know.
Mm.
And so when you have an experience of such, certainly Duane and I have been doing this forever, and we have such we know that at the core, humans are good.
Yeah.
You can't hurt somebody that you know. When we're doing these crazy things, ultimately it's coming out of pain and hurt. It's a defense that's activating out of pain and hurt. And the more that we can address that as humans, the better our chances of surviving on this planet.
And it's horrible what's taking place, because as Catherine said, the absence of knowing someone or even a whole culture, what we are prepared to do, because we don't think we're hurting people. We think we're hurting enemies. Mm-hmm. We've reduced them down to two-dimensional caricatures of themselves. Like in the Israeli-Palestine conflict, the kids are growing up to view the other side right from the get-go as being enemies, mm-hmm. threats, when anything could be further from the truth. Well, in our natural state, mm-hmm. and we don't know each other, and we have to get to know each other. Because if we got to know each other, really got to know each other, we would never do what we do. Mm-hmm. We couldn't.
Yeah.
We couldn't stand it.
Yeah. Yeah. We are so disconnected. Many people. And through the work that you're doing, I feel also through the idea of conscious grief, if we can be conscious in our grief, then we are not afraid of our vulnerability. We keep our hearts open. I hope that it can create a more compassionate society.
Mm-hmm. How could it not?
Yeah, but
we all have to do our bit.
Pardon?
We all have to do our bit, and it starts with self.
Yeah. How would you define conscious grief, if you had to?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to define it?
I could. I think that it takes place in the safety of connection.
Yeah.
And it means legitimately letting yourself walk through the process as it emerges.
Mm-hmm.
There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. Not that there's an end, like that you'll ever feel good or that you won't feel sad when you think of the person sometimes, etc. I don't mean an end in that sense, but there's a beginning, middle, and an end to the intensity that you go through in a grieving process. You start out, your nervous system will naturally numb you a little bit. That's letting you integrate, right? Yeah. That's okay. That's part of the process, unless you decide you want to live there. Then it's less helpful. Mm-hmm. And so it's just holding your heart and realizing this is my heart that loves right now.
Mm-hmm.
My father committed suicide.
And this is part, can I just finish with that? And then absolutely, right? This is part of the process of actually legitimately loving.
Yeah.
My father committed suicide in 1986.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't say I'm over it yet.
No. How can you?
I'm also not in denial. It's not, if somebody said, are you over it yet? I said, why would I want to be over it, actually? I mean, it continue. I revisit it. And it goes deeper and deeper in terms of being able to understand what might have been going through my father's mind and his heart, his broken heart. And I get more and more prepared to embrace the depths of knowing him. It's a process. That's conscious grieving, like stepping in, staying in, and continuing to look around. In this Western world, we want to just take a pill and get over it. Why? It's actually quite rich.
And when you can do that, you can maintain your connection, right?
Yeah.
You can hold that person in your heart and mind, mm-hmm. which is a really important thing.
I remember a very special moment with Catherine in our work, in our counselor training program. We used to show in our lectures the movie It's a Wonderful Life. Mm-hmm. and there was a scene where the main character was about to dive off a bridge and commit suicide because he thought his life was worthless. And he ended up not doing that. He went back and had a very, very purpose-driven life. But I remember turning to Catherine and said, and my father jumped off that bridge. Mm-hmm. And how letting her be with me in that moment of real sadness and despair around losing my own father that way was, it allows me to heal as opposed to being strong or getting over it or having a stiff upper lip. It's actually being real, raw, and vulnerable. It turns into something beautiful, actually.
Yeah, it does. Like you say, it's rich. And
rich. I think that's a very apropos word used to describe it.
I agree. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up this wonderful conversation?
Just how wonderful it's been to connect to you again.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm really appreciating this with you.
Same here.
People like you that remind us to keep going.
Yeah.
That we could have that 14 years later, have this kind of impact on you and see the fruition and the generative waves that it's produced that you are holding in your life. And it touches me deeply.
Well, I was thinking, just before we came on, I was like, in the Rude Awakening, I really got the awareness. Like I was so taken with this world, of healing and self-development and therapy. And I had my business in fashion, and I just thought, no, I really want to do something with helping people. And that was really the beginning of planting the seeds of, where I am now. So
look at you now.
Really beautiful that we're sitting here together, and so I'm very, very, very grateful to have met you, and I just want more and more people to have the experience of your work, and so I'm excited that we get to have this interview and share it with as many people as we can. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Tara.
Thank you to everybody who's been watching, and I'll see you next time. Lots of love. Bye.